Can you tell me a little bit about the history of madness?
Yeah, so the history of madness really, I mean, it dates back to the ancient Greeks, really, in terms of how it was conceptualized. But there's been numerous, I think, ideologies or understandings from various communities around the world as to what madness actually looks like. I think it's important to note that there's no one answer, no one solution to what madness actually is. And I think at times madness has been romanticized by society, by the community. It's also been demonized. So I think that, despite its history, it has been sought to, I guess, be understood from different perspectives and different communities, depending on the culture and the spirituality determinants. I think it's important to note that through the period of industrialization, though, we went from a period of madness being seen as demonic, and we saw a lot of witch hunting, pre-industrialization, which was as a direct result of kind of trying to cast out madness and madness being seen as a moral wrong or a moral injury, and something that was, to be shunned, something that was to be swept under the rug of society and controlled and managed. We then saw it medicalised through the progression of biomedicine as it is today, where we saw Western medicine start to develop through industrialisation, which then meant that human beings were kind of, subject to research, subject to modernist science at the time, which was coincided with institutionalisation, where people in the kind of 18th, 19th century were institutionalised with madness and were studied as objects, really. And then through that period, madness was medicalised. So it became something that was quite spiritual, something that had kind of religious determinants, something that was also revered in certain cultures, such as shamanism. Psychiatry actually evolved from shamanism, and in some circles, psychiatry is deemed the oldest living discipline in the world because of its basis in shamanism. However, through the process of modernism and science, it was sought to be seen through a biomedical lens and seen as a fault of biochemistry and a biochemical imbalance in the brain, which has since been debunked predominantly, as we really don't know actually a lot about how psychiatric medication works. And if it does work, we don't really have a great evidence base around the reasoning around that. We just use what works because it works, which is kind of frightening in a way. You don't go to your general practitioner and they kind of test your blood for a mental health issue, whereas you get medication for diabetes when your blood's tested. So we really don't know how that all works. So, and now we're going through this shift again where we're kind of harping back to looking at environmental causes and looking more at trauma and how trauma has an impact on mental health issues, and particularly attachment issues and relational issues. And we're starting to look at the violence of the system, structural violence, such as, through homophobia or through classism, through saneism, and really starting to understand intersectionality and trauma, and how people experience distress or neurodiversity in response to an unjust world, an unfair world. So we're sort of in this in-between limbo period where we still have this prevailing powerful biomedical model that has a lot of epistemic privilege, which just means that there's a hierarchy of knowledge in science, or what, Western colonial patriarchal science has told us it should be, which is that biomedicine and law are up the top, most valued. Sociology is kind of down the bottom, along with lived and living experience, Indigenous perspective, lots of different oppressed knowledges that are kind of in this hierarchy. So we're in this period of trying to challenge that injustice of epistemology and the hierarchy of knowledge, to sort of move and shift towards focusing on, well, what's actually the causation of these issues rather than what's the surface level symptoms. Because when you address the surface, you don't actually address a sustainable way of understanding the human condition. So we're moving slowly towards a more political understanding of people's experiences. But that's very hard to do when the medical model is predominantly an economy. There's profit to be made in the medical model, such as through hospitals, through professions and professional associations, through diagnosis and treatment, through psychology, and psychiatry and the big pharmaceutical industry is very, very strong and has a lot of power and vested interest in politics and funding politics, which means that we never really are funded to seek the truth. we're funded to seek economies and interventions that pay, that make a profit. And therein lies the conflict of our current system. Yeah.